Everybody, welcome to Cutthroat Commander. I'm your host Tim, and this week we are featuring Thada, Adel, Acquisitor, and we are up right now against Timberwolf, who's playing Polukranos. In case you haven't read the deck list or watched any of the previous videos, Thada, Adel, Acquisitor is blue 1, legendary Island Walk Merfolk Rogue. When it deals damage to a player, combat damage to a player, you search their library. You can take an artifact, exile it, and cast it until end of turn. For those of you who don't know Polukranos from its recent time in Standard, it is 2 green, legendary Hydra 5/5 with monstrous of green XX. And when you monstrous it, it can deal X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures your opponent controls. It is worth noting that it is not difficult to do that for enough to kill my general. So green spot removal normally leaves a lot to be desired, but his commander does provide some counterplay against my general. As far as matchup goes, green decks can be very tricky sometimes. I mean, there are games where you just cannot keep up with their ramp, and starting on turn 3, you're just getting acidic slimed on your lands or your mana rocks. You get Terrastodon maybe turn 5, 4 sometimes if they're lucky. Like, these games have a tendency to snowball in green's favor if you're not careful. And there's 2 different types of Polukranos decks. Basically, they're more mid-range ones that their curve tends to be clustered among the 3 to 7 drop range. And then there are just the hardcore ramp decks where they're trying to get to tooth and nail as fast as possible, trying to get to massive Polukranos as much as possible. And those aren't hard categories. Obviously, those are just kind of 2 general ways the deck plays out. And there are games where it's the same deck, and it just depends on what cards they draw in their hand. And that can be tricky. You can sometimes, like in a mid-range deck that's playing a lot of 5-drops, that Farseek or that Cultivate might not be too threatening. But if that's ramping them to tooth and nail, well, the impact of those cards is a lot more. Also, the number of planeswalkers they have. A lot of these green decks tend to play pretty much every Garruk they're allowed to, along with other problematic ones. Nissa, Worldwaker, Freyalise, Llanowar's Fury. And they pack a lot of artifact hate, which obviously isn't ideal for our deck. But I'm looking at my hand. The advantage I have is their biggest, most threatening spells, things like their Tooth and Nails, I can counter. But other than that, it's just a matter of playing powerful cards and hoping mine match up well with his. So, looking at this, I decide I will keep this hand. It has turn 1, 2, and probably turn 3 plays as well. Fidalcan Shackles, if I can protect it, is going to be absolutely busted against his deck, and presuming I get some more islands. So it's all good. I'm not optimistic about the chances of a Thada Adel getting through if he's playing a bunch of creatures, which green decks, of course, normally are. So here I suspend Ancestral Vision. No big surprise there. Merchant Scroll is a good draw. Can help access some of your more obscure answers, bounce spells, things like that. Here, I could play Ponder, but since I drew the 3rd land, I don't think it's as important this time. I think it's more important to counter something that might be difficult to deal with instead. And he misses a land drop, so I duck that for a turn. Here, since he's missing land drops on an empty board, I choose to play Jace, since I'm almost certain to get 2 activations out of him. I draw Misdirection, which is good, in case he has, I don't know, Beast Within. Instead, he plays Leatherback Baloth, which is a little awkward since it's actually kind of hard to deal with. I draw again off Jace, grab a Mind Stone. That Jin Gitaxias is not doing anything for me. I cast Ponder trying to hit a land. I whiff, and it's tempting to keep Bribery here because I know, you just absolutely know that he's playing Eldrazi or Terrastodon or even something like Woodfall Primus that is going to make it a very bad day for him. But I decide I really need lands, and my shuffle is rewarded when I draw Island. Now here, you have a decision point you want to make. Do you want to play the Mind Stone? Do you want to hold up the counter magic? Counterspell is a lot more important than negate, obviously, so that double blue, I decide, is just too critical, so I decide to hold on to the Mind Stone. It doesn't ramp me into anything too crucial the following turn. Alright, so retreat to Kazandu. This doesn't look very threatening. The issue I have with this card is if he starts making landfall triggers, that will quickly get these creatures out of Vidalcan Shackle's range. That you might leave that if you're playing, but I decided the one way to lose this game is for this Baloth to just quickly get out of hand, and for me not to have a good way to deal with it without leaving myself open to some other brutal spells. So I do decide to negate this. He takes out the Jace. My Ancestral Visions comes off cooldown, and I get really unlucky when I totally whiff on lands. So I play out my Mind Stone, and I really don't feel like getting this Shackles blown up quite yet, and this Crucible Worlds obviously doesn't actually do anything yet. That Shackles is important enough to me that I decide I'm willing to discard an extra card. Ulamog, I can just get back later, and I'm a long way off from casting it. Now I can also get back Jin Gitaxias, thanks to the shuffle. And that's another card I'm nowhere near casting, so I don't lose a ton from having to discard there, but it's annoying not to hit my land drop nonetheless. He plays Surak the Hunt Caller at this point. And this is going to get really awkward, because this thing means he's going to hit me for 9 damage this turn. And there's no guarantee that I'm going to be able to Shackles that thing. And it's only going to just start chaining into more big hasty threats. So as much as I wanted to save this counterspell for something more threatening, I make the decision that might as well use my mana, counter this. In future turns, if I really need to stop something, I can hold up Venser, or I can Merchant Scroll for another counterspell. So I counter this and take 4 from the Leatherback Baloth. Alright, here I draw Evolving Wilds. It may not look like it, but that is actually pretty much exactly what I'm looking for. Obviously, a normal Onslaught / Zendikar fetch land would have been better, but what this allows me to do now is set up a turn where I cast multiple must-deal-with artifacts. So I start with the Temporal Mastery, after grabbing a tapped island with the Evolving Wilds. And the reason it now has 2 must-counter artifacts, or must-destroy artifacts, is Crucible Worlds, because of that Evolving Wilds, now actually does something, and threatens to do more if, God forbid, I ever draw a Strip Mine. So there goes Crucible Worlds, bring back the Evolving Wilds and sack it, and then Vidalcan Shackles. So at this point, Vidalcan Shackles is great, but given my hand, what I'm really looking to do is just survive long enough with the Crucible Worlds to cast Kozilek. And this is where your opponent doesn't necessarily know what decision to make, because as we see on his turn, he does have a Krosan Grip. But the question is, which one does he target? Crucible Worlds or Vidalcan Shackles? In the short term, that Vidalcan Shackles looks like it's going to be problematic. Looks like it's going to take his Leatherback Baloth and, start beating him with it. In the long run, however, Crucible Worlds can just get out of hand. And he chooses to take the short-term route. And he does have time to draw another solution to Crucible Worlds here. So he hits me down to 32. I draw Snapcaster Mage, which is a great draw. I could Evolving Wild, Snapcaster Mage, Temporal Manipulation, take another turn, and have a lot of mana, but that still wouldn't quite get me to Kozilek level mana. So what I choose to do instead is cast Merchant Scroll for Mana Drain. And this is an illustration of why Mana Drain is completely unfair, and why it's banned in 1v1 with good reason. Is grabbing that Mana Drain absolutely changes the nature of this game. He is a deck with nothing but big, stupid creatures, meaning he doesn't have a lot of choice other than to run a big creature into Mana Drain. And that's, of course, hugely dangerous. The alternative is he can just sit here and try and get by with Leatherback Baloth and only Leatherback Baloth, but it's probably not a good long-term plan. So he's kind of damned here. That Mana Drain is going to do him in, as you can see. Because what happens, he decides to play into it with Garruk's Pack Leader. This really isn't that important of a spell, but you still want to go with Mana Drain just because it allows you to cast Kozilek on time. And sure enough, 5 mana plus this stuff. I accidentally overtap a little, but it's not a big deal. Play the Temple of the False God, the Relic of Progenitus, and now have Kozilek with Misdirection and with Venser up. So at that point, he rightfully chooses to concede because there's virtually no way he's going to be able to kill Kozilek before it starts annihilating his board. So the reason I chose this video is all day long it's control, 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 just playing against control again and again. I did eventually get like one game against an aggro deck, kind of a tempo-y deck, but so I was very happy to see a mid-range kind of green dude deck because it illustrates how this deck, what the important cards in this deck are against that, how you formulate your game plan, when you're just probably not going to ever hit with your general and have to go on a different game plan, and in general how to play this deck in a format where you're not just sitting there doing nothing facing a bunch of islands, or when your back isn't absolutely to the wall on turn 1 by something like an Edric deck. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This should be my last one, but I might record a few more throughout the week if I see some entertaining games, and I look forward to next week. Thank you.